Back, the number of unemployed job seekers in the country has risen sharply. Statistics South Africa says more than 520,000 people have been added to the official number of unemployed between the fourth quarter of last year and the first quarter of this year. It brings South Africa's unemployment rate to 26.7%. Now that's up 2.2 percentage points on the previous quarter. The largest decreases were observed in construction, manufacturing and the trade industries. The expanded definition of unemployment, which includes those people who have stopped looking for work, stands at 36.3% in the first 3 months of the year. Well, economist at Investment Solutions, Lesiba Mothata, joins me now just to scan through some of those stats. Lesiba, good afternoon. I mean, you can't help but point out it's the highest number in the history since the survey started in 2008. I mean, without being alarmist, this is quite a jump.
It is, and it's without exogenous factors. In other words, it's worse than on 2008 when we had the financial crisis. And here it talks to really the underlying economic constructs of the economy are not working out all that well. If you look at the details of who is being shedded, it's mainly those in the informal sector, the elementary workers, the most vulnerable in society are losing jobs. To the contrary, professionals, in other words, you have education and you work in a formal construct, they've added to the jobs number we've seen in this quarter. So it is quite alarming. It just shows that there's a need for structural reform in the economy. We cannot continue in this way because even if you look at per capita GDP growth, which is growth over the number of people in the economy, it has deteriorated quite sharply in terms of a rate of growth since 2010. So these numbers are commensurate to that we see elsewhere in the economy, particularly around per capita GDP growth, which is a concerning outcome, an outcome that has been highlighted by rating agencies like Standard & Poor's.
But let's be fair. I mean, to what extent is the seasonal factor coming into play here? Because, of course, you have that festive period where casual workers are employed. We're out of that in the December period. Is that a big factor here?
Not in this particular number, because as you could appreciate, retailers, etc., stocking up for the Christmas period, they hire well in advance. And now you're in a January situation where you find that all that has been washed out, and in fact on a statistical basis Stats SA can adjust some of these seasonal factors that we find in statistics. So this really is an honest yet sober outcome of what our economy is at, which people are losing jobs. It's not an ideal situation.
You were speaking about those areas where we've seen the job losses. I mean, let's just go through some of that. Trade declining by 119,000 job losses, manufacturing 100,000, construction 77,000. That's painting a bleak picture in these sectors, isn't it?
Yeah, because in there there's a tone of those sectors that are also outward looking, in other words, they're export oriented. And in there it shows that we are not competitive enough to make sure that our exports are growing despite a weak currency. You would have imagined that a weak currency will buoy export oriented industries, which will result with higher employment. That's not the situation that we find ourselves here. It's a bit of a worrying trend. I do think that it requires a wake-up call. I think authorities need to sit down and say we need to construct a new path of economic growth, especially in this scenario where we could see GDP growth at 0.5% this year.
Let's go back to this factor that you mentioned, the informal sector, very worryingly losing jobs. I mean, I would think that's the area you go and create these small businesses, get more people employed. We see them actually losing jobs by a big margin here. What does that tell you?
It shows that which we're doing around small and medium enterprises is not sufficient. In fact, the expenditure that has been put out during the budget on SMMEs was very minimal. Admittedly, it's a tough time. It's a budget that really needed to cover a lot of things, but there isn't sufficient focus on small and medium enterprises. I say sufficient because there are countries that exhibit that. India, doing forceful outcomes on SMEs. You start a business in India, in the next 5 years, you're tax exempt. An outcome we don't find in our country. You look at countries like Mauritius are doing very innovative things around small and medium enterprises. I do think much more effort needs to be put out. There was, however, a conversation about a month ago when this roadshow has happened, and they had said they'll come back with a plan. and it will arrive in May. And I'm looking forward to see if there is a construct of dealing with this situation. In it, they had mentioned small and medium enterprises, and I do hope that we'll see some conversation arriving from the National Treasury.
Finally, what did arrive in May, though, was a decision by Moody's over the weekend affirming our status, our credit rating, 2 notches above non-investment grade. What extent does that go to actually getting some of the investors to put in their job-creating money in the country? I mean, certainly in the short term, that is a positive, is it not?
It is in a way that Moody's, we need to, however, appreciate that Moody's is catching up.
Yeah.
They have done a good thing here by not even continue to deteriorate the credit quality of SA. That's a wonderful outcome. It looks like this conversation that has happened with the authorities are yielding fruit. But needless to say, they are still 2 notches above the rest, which is a good thing. The concern, the real thing to look at here is what Standard & Poor's says. And in it, they have detailed concern around per capita GDP growth. They've looked at economic reforms, which are not still coming. So we are not out of the woods yet. The real thing to look at is the June 3rd outcome from Standard & Poor's.
We'll keep our eyes on it. Lesiba Mothata from Investment Solutions, thanks indeed for coming in.
My pleasure.